Thank you, Brian. So as Brian mentioned, I'm Nick Sweeney. I'm an applications engineer with computer-aided technology. Specifically, I work in the Inflow section. At Inflow, we focus on the PDM and PLM solutions of our business. So as you can see from my screen, CATI has their hands in a lot of different businesses, everything from our design software, so SolidWorks 3D and electrical, to anything with SolidWorks simulation or Simulia. And we even do 3D printers as well. PDM and PLM is a really large part of our business. So CATI has a branch that focuses purely on the PDM, PLM, and that is Inflow Technology, which is the section that I work in. So today we're going to be talking about SolidWorks PDM and specifically some of the user interface best practices and some tips and tricks in it. But to give some background, I wanted to talk about why PDM is such a valuable piece of software and what it really offers. So when customers are looking at coming over and doing PDM, often these are the key issues that they need to address. You know, we've got engineering content management. So oftentimes people will have their content saved all over a network drive and there's no consistent place. So it's really hard to find things. Or maybe their revision control it's manual. You know, someone, when you get all the way through the alphabet, someone might use AA and someone might use AB. And those might mean the same thing, but it's error prone and it's difficult to make sure that everyone is consistent. Moving on to bill of materials, there's no real integration between CAD engineering and the manufacturing BOM a lot of times, versus something like SolidWorks PDM that can help you to address that issue. And again, having that revision control be automatic helps to make it less error prone. It also helps a lot with process management. Through things like SolidWorks PDM with SolidWorks Manage, you can have something like a dashboard. That way you can have that top-down visibility of the process. And you also get that connection between your engineering processes and your documents. You can have reference documents connected to your main document so that you know maybe if you update a part that you need to rerun the simulation on it. And lastly, there are multiple database questions. So you need a link between that CAD and that ERP system. And SolidWorks PDM has the ability to link through third-party softwares to things like SAP or CollabNet or anything like that so that we can have that connection seamlessly between the two softwares. So for SolidWorks PDM itself, these are the key topics that I'm going to be covering today. That first question of, I can't find the file that I need. It's really frustrating when you can't find what you need when you want it. So I'm going to be going over some ways that you can find your files quicker and easier with SolidWorks PDM. It's also very frustrating if you go into SolidWorks and you open up a file, you open up a really large assembly, and then you find out that it was the wrong assembly because maybe you didn't understand the file name or you clicked on the wrong thing because you can't see that file before you open it. So I'll talk about how SolidWorks PDM gives us that ability to validate and make sure that we're going to the right file at the right time. We also have a lot of people that maybe they're working remotely and they're going to be maybe flying on a plane from one plant to another. So they won't have internet, but they've got some work they need to do. So I'll be showing how SolidWorks PDM has an offline mode and we can work on our files without having to be connected to the system right at that moment. And then I will talk about if you need to make a change to a file. You know, maybe you don't want to lose an old version of it. You want to work on a copy of that file so that you know that you'll still have that original version intact. So I'll talk about a couple different options that SolidWorks PDM offers there. And finally, I'll be going over just some additional tips and tricks to make that user interface function in a more functional manner. I'm going to switch over to my environment. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is introduce SolidWorks PDM. For anyone that hasn't used it an extensive amount or hasn't used it at all and maybe is just looking into it, SolidWorks PDM is built directly into Windows Explorer. And what it does is it takes that normal Windows Explorer and it enhances your use of it, enhances that experience. So we can see right here, this is just my C drive. It's pretty boring looking folder structure, except I have these two blue folders, Inflow and Inflow Demo. And when I go into those folders, now I have the SolidWorks PDM interface and it's alive and it's working. So I can tell that I'm in the interface because my files are green. At the top, we can see the actual files themselves. We can see everything that's in this folder structure in the columns that we have defined. Down below, we can see our different tabs, so we can see a preview of a file or a data card. And I'll be going through each of those throughout this demonstration. So the first thing I'm going to do is browse to one of our parts. If you've ever seen a PDM demo before, this part may look familiar to you. And that part, or this assembly, is the mountain scooter assembly. A really cool looking assembly, and there's a lot of things that we can show with it. So this is the very first thing I wanted to show. We have that issue of, I have this part and I opened it in SolidWorks, but it's the wrong thing. And we never want to go through that. SolidWorks PDM has this great validation option of having a preview turned on. Having this preview makes it so that I didn't have to open this assembly, which might have taken me a minute, might have taken me 2 minutes to open. Instead, within a couple seconds, I'm able to get a quick view of it. I can look at it and know that this is exactly what I want. Now, maybe I actually want to get a measurement off of this. And normally you would have to open up SolidWorks and you'd have to wait and go through that load time. But with SolidWorks PDM, we have the measure tool built right into the interface. So we can click on the measuring tape and we can measure what is the distance between these two wheels. And get my trackpad to work. So really quickly, without having to touch this file, I have not opened it in any way, shape, or form. I can tell what the distance is between these two wheels. I know if something fits there. So maybe if I have 3 different versions of this mountain scooter, looking at this file name and the description, there's nothing telling me what that distance is. So I would normally have to open it up. But I can quickly know that it's the 111 millimeter, roughly, space that I'm looking at, versus maybe I've got one that's 130 and one that's 200. So I can very quickly get that look. Now, not all customers need to do that. In fact, maybe they want to see their file. So we can go through and we can flip through the different views. But sometimes even the files are a bit too large for this preview to load quickly and effectively. So you don't want to sacrifice performance. You don't want to lose those files. You want to be able to see them. So one very cool option that we have is that we can show our bitmap for SolidWorks files. And what this does is once I click away and select my assembly, now it loads in this SolidWorks file as a bitmap. So it's a 2D picture. I can't rotate it. I don't currently have the measure tool option, but it loads significantly quicker. If I go into the components folder, again, for every part, it opens very quickly as a bitmap. Now, if I want to get if I want to be able to rotate it and have all those measuring tools available, I can click inside the preview. And now I have the PDM viewer loaded up again. And I can use the measure tool, measure anything that I want to. So if I want the diameter, I can see it very quickly. So the next thing I want to talk about is the data card. And I'm going to go back up to the full assembly because it's more interesting. This data card has all of the information that we want to store and easily access on it. So through this data card, we can see what is the description. We can see that it's a subassembly with a left-hand chassis. We can see things like the created by or the checked by. And all of this information is custom to say whatever you want it to say, whatever you want to have showing on here, it is that for you. Now, one of the really cool things you can do with this information is you can search on it. This now goes into the I need to find the right file or part at the right time. Everyone knows about the standard Windows Explorer search. You can always use that to find a file, but it can be kind of slow and maybe you won't find the exact file you want. You can't search on metadata. SolidWorks PDM has a search tool built in. Simply click on the toggle on the upper right and we're launched into the search tool. And in here, we can choose which file, which folder we want to search in. So if I want to search anywhere in the vault, I can just type in the slash, and then I can choose to type in the name, the description, or the number. So for example, if I wanted to find that left-hand chassis in the description, I can just search. And now any file that has the letters LH in the description sequentially, it searches exactly for that. It will pull up those files. And then I can quickly go through the preview and know exactly what I'm looking at. So then maybe I don't need all of these in. I know that there's the 239 in it. SolidWorks PDM also lets you search on multiple things at the same time. So now instead of having to search through all of those results, I now am searching and finding only something that has the description with LH in it, as well as 239 in the part number, telling me exactly what I want. And again, I can choose to have this as a bitmap or as not a bitmap. I prefer to have it as the 3D personally. So now let's imagine you do this search pretty frequently. You can actually save favorites in SolidWorks PDM. So by clicking the little star up here, you can choose Add to Favorites. And it's going to ask you to give it a name. So if I call it LH-239, I can then choose which users may see this favorite. Maybe Adrian uses this search all the time as well, and I want him to be able to use this. So now Adrian will be able to see my favorites in addition to myself, but only this favorite. So it's favorite specific, not all of my favorites. So when I click OK, I can go through and use different searches. So I already have one called the bolt description. So this just searches for any file with the word bolt in the description. And I can go through and I can look at the preview and find out, is this the one I want? Now, since I've added the LH, I can find that one as well. Now, maybe you've gone through and that search is no longer valid. Maybe you've changed it from LH to left hand. You've decided LH it's not descriptive enough. We need it to be more filled out. Click. So the way you change that is by going into the search tool. If you select the search tool, you can see over on the left-hand side, I'm going to expand this so it's a little bit bigger. You can see all of our favorites. We can see Bolt, and we can see LH-239. So for example, now we can actually change this to be left-hand. Or maybe that's completely invalid now and we don't even use that search anymore. We can right-click and delete. It'll ask us if we're sure. We want to say yes. And now that favorite is gone. So if I close the search tool and go back into my favorites, now I don't have the ability to search on it. It updates automatically, so we don't have to worry about that. And then when you want to close the search tool, simply click on the close search, and you're right back where you started. Another cool thing you can do with this entire preview is you can reorganize things. So you've seen me a couple times. I've had to resize things and move them around. You can see right now this scooter, it doesn't exactly fit on my screen. I have to click on this little isometric button to make it fit right. But that doesn't have to be the case. In fact, maybe I don't care about this information over on the right-hand side, or maybe I don't want it on the right-hand side. If I wanted to do that, I could get rid of this card preview. Now this takes up the entire bottom half of my screen. And that's great, but what if I don't want it on the bottom half of my screen? So you can choose to have the preview placement to the right instead. Now I see the folder structure over on the left. Now I can go through and I get a slightly larger version of this file. So this is just letting me customize this to look exactly how I want it to look. And I do prefer to have it on the bottom. So I'm going to leave it there. And again, I mentioned the bitmap. You can do bitmap for DWG files, so it's not just SolidWorks files. It can be any kind of file. You can have that bitmap there as an option. You can also include things like your simulation results on check-in, so you don't have to remember to do that by yourself. So what are some other options that are available to me? When I right-click on the assembly file, I have this really long list of menu options. And maybe this list is slightly overwhelming. Maybe I don't need to have all of these different options. Every menu in SolidWorks PDM is customizable as well. If you go into the administrator tool and open up your user, and this is the Invisible Man, this is my Halloween costume. You go to your settings and click on menus. You can customize your menu to be whatever you want. So for example, we were just looking at the file shortcut menu. And this is everything that you would normally see when you right-click on a file. So we can see things, we can see our PDM commands. We can also see there are non-PDM commands, and we have operating system commands. So we can customize this and do whatever we want with it. So for example, maybe we want to have the copy tree as an option. Copy tree is a great way to make copies of files and work on them separately. And I'll go into that in a little bit. But maybe we want to have that on our right-click menu instead of having to select tools. So we can click Insert Command. And now if you scroll down to the bottom, we can see that it's been added to our menu. And we can move this around. We can go up and place it near the add-ins, place it near Notify, or maybe we decide, actually, I don't want that there. We can just get rid of copy tree. We can get rid of anything we want. We can add anything we want. And this is any kind of menu in SolidWorks PDM. So another thing I want to show you are these columns. I want to get more into that. So we've seen this information. We've seen how we can find things in the data card. We can search on them. But this is a lot about the UI. This is what I want to emphasize is custom to be how you want. You can customize these column sets to be whatever you want and have whatever you want in these columns. And I'll go in a folder so that it's a little more filled out. Maybe you want the file type to be early on. You can simply drag and drop and move things around to be as you want. Maybe you want the checked out by later on because that's less of something you're concerned about right now. By dragging and dropping, you can order this however you want so that it looks exactly as you need it to look. So you can rearrange this in the search tool, or you can rearrange it in your normal file view tool. It doesn't matter which one you do. And of course, if you ever have questions about what's going on, if you ever get lost, we do have this little help file. So immediately, because we're in a file view right now, it takes us to the SolidWorks PDM help file, and we can see what everything is, and we can get a quick answer to any questions we have, maybe what something is, what it means, something like that. So I mentioned the copy tree and branch tool as well. Maybe you want to make a modification to a file, but you don't want to lose any past configuration to it. There are a couple ways you can do that in SolidWorks PDM. So I'm going to start on this assembly, and we see that we have some options. Actually, I'm going to choose one that's not checked out, or one that's checked out by me. So again, this is the file that we're going to be looking at. Under Tools, we have these two options. One is Branch, and one is Copy Tree. I'm going to briefly explain them, and I'm also going to plug that next week I'm doing a webinar talking about these two more in depth. So I highly encourage you to check it out. But the Copy Tree tool and the Branch tool do similar functions. What they do, in essence, is they copy your file and allow you to make changes without changing the original file. The difference here is Copy Tree will take it and it will take all of your references and create a completely separate file. It's no longer tied to that original. There's no reference to it. Branch will create a branch from that file, and you can have as many branches as you want. So what Branch is great for is a situation where maybe you want to try out 3 different designs. You want to try out maybe 3 different holes in this little gear here. Maybe you want to make it more lightweight. Using Branch, we can try out all 3 designs. We could run simulations on it, make sure it all looks the way that we want, make sure it functions properly. And then you can use this little merge tool to put that back to that original file. So then those other 2 branches are not associated with that original file. And you now have a second version of it to be that new whole design. You can go back and forth. You can go between them to make sure you're on the right file. This is a great way to make sure you aren't going to mess up that original file. That's always the fear. You never want to mess up something you aren't supposed to touch. I also mentioned, what if you want to work offline? Maybe you're on an airplane and you need to be doing something with that. There's this handy Work Offline tool. So what Work Offline does is it lets you use any files that you already have downloaded onto your local cache. You can make any changes to it that you want. But you do not have access to all of the files in the vault. You can't make changes to a file if you don't have it checked out. So when I go back into the demonstration folder, you can see my folders are now blue instead of green. Blue means they're quote unquote cold and they need to be warmed back up. Now we can still go through and we can see what exactly is in here. We can go to the Mountain Scooter, we can go to the engineering folder, and we can see file. It's still here, it's not missing. But you can see that right here it says writable. That means we do not have write access to that file right now. There's nothing we can do to it. And we don't have access to the components folder either. Now, I've also seen it where a lot of customers, maybe their internet blinks in their company and they suddenly lose access to it. And they're waiting for it to come back up and it never seems to. And they get really confused. Why are my folders blue? Well, to go back online, just hit Tools, and the only option outside of the inbox is to work online. So now we're reconnecting to the vault. We're getting that connection back, and we're able to actually work on those files again. So again, if we go back into Windows Explorer, now the folders are green. Green is good. Green means I have access to them. Now the components folder is no longer empty. So the final thing that I want to mention is I've talked about simulation reports, and that kind of just having a reference document, having something that you need to update when you update a part. Sometimes it's difficult to keep in mind everything that you need to do. We can see we have this simulation report right here. The preview doesn't really tell us much, but I know this is a simulation report. It's that CWR file. Solidworks PDM has the ability to link reference files. So if I right-click, I can copy this file, and it goes to this rotor brake. But since the rotor brake is already referenced, I have to go to a different part. So if you click on Paste as Reference after right-clicking on the assembly where it's not linked yet, you can choose to add it as a reference and show it in the bill of materials. So what this means is when you're in the bill of materials tab in Solidworks PDM, it's going to show you that it has a simulation report tied to it. So now we're going to know right away, hey, I need to update these files in addition to my standard files, because there's more going on here than just your normal part. I need to be concerned with anything that is also referencing it. And with that, that concludes my tips and tricks as far as PDM goes. I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint really quick. So what we talked about today is we covered these 4 key questions. Maybe you can't find that file that you need, and it gets really frustrating when you don't know where it is. Maybe someone saved it in a folder that you don't know about. You can use the search tool in PDM to find any files you want, and you can search on any kind of information you want. You don't have to search on the file name. You can search on the description. You can search by vendor or material. We also need to know if this is the right file that we're working on. So we can validate which file we're looking at with things like the preview or the data card to get more information about it. Or maybe you're going on an airplane and you won't have internet, but you still need to do some work. Well, PDM, you can work offline, and that way you can work from anywhere at any time. Or maybe you need to change a file. And with tools like branching and copy tree, you don't ever have to worry about losing your old versions of a file again because you're making those brand new versions of a file. And with that, I conclude my demonstration. Brian, do we have any questions?
Nick, no, I don't see any questions. And I'll go ahead and pause our recording for now. And if anybody has questions, we'll hang out for just a couple more minutes and we'll try to address those.